from being lobbyists for 1 full year after they leave their elected office. However, they are exempting themselves. One of the things that they don't like to talk about when they're talking about this ethics bill they're passing down in Jefferson City. Something else is quietly going on, and it seems like they are restricting access to the press. Darren Lee is with the Columbia Journalism Review. Good morning, Darren. Thanks for joining us here in St. Louis.
Hi, thanks very much, McGraw.
You got it. The Columbia Journalism Review is the gold standard of journalism review. Is that safe to say?
Well, I won't argue with that assessment.
Okay, good. You guys have a story on your website about how the Senate down in Jefferson City is making it harder for reporters to do their job. What's going on?
Yeah, well, what happened was, and actually there's a number of different elements to this, but you know, the main news from last week, you know, this beginning of this legislative session, which is supposed to be, as you mentioned, all about ethics and transparency, and yet what was, I think, the very first official act of the Missouri Senate in the new session was to vote for a rule change that bans the reporters from the Senate floor, where reporters have had a table there for as long as anyone can remember, where they can report and keep up with the legislative action on the Senate floor there. And the very first thing they did in this new session was pretty decisive, overwhelming vote to kick the reporters off the floor it's going to be as of March 29th, and move them up into the visitors gallery area 1 floor up, where won't have as good a view of the action. And then this comes only a year after the Senate removed or moved the reporters from the offices that they had occupied on the first floor for again, as long as anyone can remember, and they've moved them all the way up to the 5th floor, which is not ADA compliant, and no elevator even goes up there. And so there have been a number of these moves. None of them may be a huge deal in and of themselves, but a number of these moves seem to be sending a very strange message at a time when the Missouri legislature is supposedly reforming itself and becoming more ethical and transparent.
One of the criticisms of the media is that one member tweeted out a private conversation between 2 senators. Can't senators speak privately on the floor of the Senate without having the media listen to every single thing they say?
Yeah, I think that, and one of the things I did in reporting this story was trying to find out more about that incident, because that was what the Senate President, Ron Richard, said was the reason why they were doing this, was because of what he called an ethical breach. But we just haven't, I couldn't get him to talk to me, even though he had sort of publicly he had mentioned this on the floor, in floor debate. But when I tried to talk to him about it and get the details of what was tweeted and why was this private, what was the ethical breach, then I couldn't get them to talk to me about that. I got Senate GOP spokeswoman to talk to me a little bit, and she was very nice, but she wouldn't give me the details on this incident that has, or multiple incidents perhaps, that has them so upset. What details have come out about it, and the AP reported some details and said that this was an incident where the former state Senate president, in 2014, so we're talking about almost 2 years ago, that the reporter tweeted out the details of this incident, where the Senate president was admonishing another senator to sort of rein in a third senator who was apparently getting too emotional during a debate and causing disruption. And then that got tweeted out, and that upset the senators. But
that's not even private.
It's hard to see what the ethical problem is there, if that's what the incident in question is. It's hard to see how that's an ethical breach. It sounds to me like that's, something that the public has a right to know. It's the business of the Senate that's being conducted on the Senate floor.
Right. Can the senators expect a private conversation on the Senate floor to be private? That's sort of where you go to have public debate.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And the quote from Ron Richard when he did talk to the press earlier was, well, this is our space. This isn't your space. Yours meaning the press. But of course, it's not the senator's space. It's the public. It is the public chamber. And certainly senators have a right to talk to their staffers and to talk in private among themselves. But it's hard to see where it's not like some kind of, covert
right. Yeah, you were on the
eavesdropping was going on.
You were on the Senate floor reporting it. You weren't in the bathroom stall secretly recording their conversation. When the elected officials have run to media outlets, including this one, to tell us how they want the University of Missouri to fire that communications professor who was looking for muscle to squash news media accounts of what was going on in Columbia, and yet they want to squash media on their own Senate floor, which is basically the same thing as a public square.
That's an irony that was pointed out. It's been pointed out by many observers, and that Senator Richard himself and many of the senators who voted to kick the reporters off the floor. These are the same senators who have signed a letter demanding that Professor Click be fired. Because of her actions in keeping the press, trying to keep reporters out of a public space at the University of Missouri during those protests. And so, it's highly ironic, to say the least, that they're now essentially, as others have said, I wasn't the first to say this by any means, but that trying to carve out their own safe space on the floor of the Senate. Just as the same people criticized professors and protesters for doing that at Mizzou.
Yeah, what a strange and crazy world we live in. Deron Lee with the Columbia Journalism Review. This article you have is on cjr.org, and we'll put it up on ktrs.com as well. Darren, thanks for checking in.
All right, thanks a lot, McGraw.
You got it. 6:58.